Corpay is our featured supplier guest today, and Doug Austin, our CEO, will come on in just a moment to introduce our guest presenter. Doug, take it away.
All right. Thank you, David. Well, welcome, everybody. We're glad you joined us today. Thanks for taking time out of your day. We started this series about a year ago, May, called our Innovative Supplier Series, and it's really designed to do three things. It's designed to get some of the most creative, competitive, innovative suppliers that we meet in our sourcing business in front of our clients and prospects. We really focus in three areas. One is expense categories. The second is in audit and recovery categories. And the third is really new revenue opportunities. Part of this today probably classifies as new revenue opportunities. We are very pleased to have Pam Cichoke of Corpay presenting Turn Your AP Department into a revenue contributor. I can tell you that we started recommending this kind of strategy back in 2010, and we've had remarkable results. I think you're going to find that Pam's company has got a lot of information to share with you, and I'd encourage you to consider the strategy as you move forward. So with that, Pam, thank you, and you take it away. Ball's in your court.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug. As Doug said, he's right. We've been working with Strategic Source, maybe not for us specifically since 2010, but for the last several years, gosh, they've been fantastic partners. And here's the beauty of it. They don't get anything from it. So it's not a revenue stream necessarily for them. And so I take great pride that they are willing to put themselves out there to back us as a company and as a resource for dealerships. But we're going to talk about really all modalities and all verticals, quite frankly. But really happy to be here, Doug. So I really appreciate it. And we are going to go through a lot of different topics today. Quite frankly, we're going to talk a little bit about Corpay and how we evolved. And I want to start there because I want to make sure that we get the confusion out of the way. Some of you on the call may know us as Invoice Pay. Started back in 2009, really focused in automotive and truck when we started our company back in 2009 and 10 with a partnership with CDK DMS. So that's a DMS that's really specific in automotive. And we just went like gangbusters. And we evolved from there into construction, into hospitality, you name it, hotel management, all over the place. Fast forward, Corpay now we've been rebranded and we're under the FleetCor umbrella, which is very important to us. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. We're under that umbrella with a bunch of other payment companies. So you're looking at my screen now. Hopefully you can all see it okay. We have Roger, who works with small businesses to automate payments. Cambridge works on the international side of our payment strategies. Invoice Pay, again, part of our solution we're still going to talk about today. And then we also have international payments, and Comdata also was a sister company of ours coming underneath, like I said, one umbrella to make up FleetCor. So super exciting that we are FleetCor. We are a FleetCor company under that umbrella. But moving forward now, what makes this so robust is we're going to center today on that center box, which is payment automation. I'm really going to focus there. But I wanted to bring to light in talking to some of the other folks at Strategic Source with other avenues to make payments and other avenues to get smarter. Think about your business today. You've got payments going out in all different directions. You have ways in which you need to strategize and pay your bills either from a consumer level or from a business level. So keep that in mind, that we're going to look at virtual card, we're able to do, T&E, we're able to do. We actually have a product called Expense Track, which helps you, obviously, that the name kind of says it all, track your expenses from a business standpoint. So as much as we're going to focus on the center box here today, when it comes to payment automation, like I was just saying, we also want to look at the rest of the toolbox, if that makes sense. So moving on, again, like I said, we're not a one-trick pony. We're a very robust company, coming underneath that FleetCor umbrella, which means we have a supplier network that's massive. We are the largest commercial issuer of MasterCard in North America. So what it does for us is it gives us the backing maybe that we didn't have back when we were a startup company in 2009 underneath that FleetCor umbrella. So rest assured, we're going to be around a while. We've been doing this for a while, and we've been very successful in what we do in the payment industry. So let's look a little bit at how things are moving in the automotive industry. It's been very interesting to watch. And I don't know if you folks on this webinar read the papers, watch the news. Things are changing and things are evolving. I don't want to blame it on COVID per se, but we're still reaping some of the benefits and some of the havoc of that, quite frankly. But when we look at the studies that have been done, one specifically by NADA, and they surveyed over 11,000 dealers. And again, this webinar, remember, is not really focused specifically on automotive. It just happens to be what my expertise is. So if you're outside of automotive or truck, that's fine. Everything that we're talking about today is relevant across verticals. So keep that in mind as well. But think about your personal lives. We don't just take out your checkbook on a weekend on Saturday afternoon and start writing checks for all the bills that we pay. That's a thing of the past. And so when NADA set out to do this, to do the survey this past year, they found a lot of changes taking place. Things are moving to a digital space. It's been accelerated massively over the last couple years. So really when they were asking folks, hey, now that COVID is settling down, are you still going to continue doing business more in a digital world? And really the answer astronomically was 82% of the folks were saying, absolutely. Why would we want to go backwards? Same thing, if you think about purchasing a car, I don't know if any of you on this call today have purchased cars recently. That's a completely different way of life in compared to maybe 4 to 5 years ago. I mean, literally, you can get online, you can choose the options that you would like, the nice leather seats, obviously the nice sunroof. If you live in Arizona like I do, you're going to want to make sure you have a fantastic air conditioner. But those are the types of things that you can look at online. You can basically order your car and you're good to go. It can actually be delivered to your home. So those types of things are changing our world. And we'll get into that a little bit further later on. Also, think about this. When you're purchasing things as a consumer, and the person at the cash register says, do you need a receipt for this? 9 times out of 10, I say no. I mean, scarily enough, they probably have my email address at this point, and the receipts are going straight to my email box. Again, this is the way of life. This is the way that we're moving, and I really think as a whole, we need to be ready for those changes, and we need to really move with the times, if that makes sense. So let's look a little bit at AP. I don't want to say it's a lost department, because it's not. I don't mean it's lost. I mean sometimes it's forgotten, if that makes sense. It's a place where we know things have to occur. We know bills have to get paid in order for the lights to stay on. But there's a lot of roadblocks within dealerships and within organizations as a whole that AP teams face that other folks outside of the AP department don't really understand. So a lot of this discussion is going to be around how AP departments function today. What can we do to make them more efficient? And here's the great thing. How can we drive revenue into a department that I hate using this, but I'm going to use it anyways, as a black hole? It's a black hole because that's where all the money is going out. So how can we change that view and have them become more of a revenue generator? Which again is one of the reasons why Doug asked us to be on the call today, is to talk about how we can make some changes in AP to create efficiencies, really major goal for us obviously, to scale those efficiencies, to securely send payments, because I'm sure everybody here doesn't want payments going to the wrong direction. Again, we'll talk about security as well in a few minutes, but it's very important. So transactionally, the payments have to get out the door, but the dealership's AP department is then dealing with unclaimed properties at the end of the year. I'm sure you guys have all heard of our friend 1099. That all has to happen to have a clean accounting system, to have clean accounting records. That's just part of the equation. But when AP teams are dealing with suppliers as well, there's always a lot involved in that. Again, these things get lost in translation because a CFO doesn't know the pains that an AP person goes through. So the AP person that's doing the reconciliation or trying to communicate with a supplier to change terms, for example, there's a lot that goes into these equations. And then obviously month end comes. Now, I've been in sales in the past and moved into management, and I talk to my team all the time about what do we do at the beginning of the month when we know the 1st through the 6th or 7th of every month, AP departments don't want to talk to us from a sales standpoint. That's for darn sure because they're trying to close their books. So again, AP is misunderstood from the responsibilities that they have to take account for, quite frankly. And so I'm really here to kind of, I guess, unlayer the onion and peel it back a little bit to talk about AP more. Let's put a focus on AP and figure out how we can make them more of a cash cow and a generator and not just a dollar bill out the door type of a concept. So we're going to go to a poll question to find out what your thoughts are today and kind of where you are on your journey from a payment automation standpoint. So one of the questions, let's go to poll question number 1. Where are you all in your payment automation journey? Are you very manual, maybe reactive, so you're slowly moving into a more automated world? Are you more selective? Meaning you're starting to move that direction to automate, or have you optimized every payment that's going out the door and you just have everything tied up in a nice, pretty bow and you guys are set for life? I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer that question. All right, now we're getting some answers. All right. So let me give you a little bit of information about what I'm seeing and really where it's very typical, quite frankly. We're really in the middle of this whole journey of how we automate the payment, the whole payment journey going forward. So is it a manual process? Absolutely. For about 22% of you, it's a manual process. Are there some of you that are reacting based on maybe the vendor telling you what they think they need or how you want to pay them? Or are you moving more towards selective? What I'm seeing is that we're really more in the reactive stage of this journey. And so what I really mean by that is how do we continue that conversation to move more of you to that optimization phase, which is reducing the amount of paper checks that are ultimately going out the door, which is probably a smart thing to do, which again, we're going to talk a lot about that in just a few minutes. Why do we want to do that? First of all, we want to create efficiencies, right? Nobody's on this call today to learn about how to run your business more poorly, I would hope. We're looking for ways to be more efficient, and we're looking for ways to optimize the way suppliers are getting paid. So it sounds easy, but there's a lot of work involved, and it really is forcing our organizations to become more symbiotic from a relationship standpoint when you look at the different departments. So when you're looking at my screen here, the reason I bring this up again is AP has different goals in comparison to maybe the supplier that they're looking to pay and what the business is ultimately looking for. So for an AP staff, if I'm running AP as an AP manager, for example, my goal is to lessen the amount of steps that my team has to take to do their job. But I'm also looking for them to have more visibility and control. Because what I don't want to do is have an AP person paying somebody that they shouldn't be paying. I don't want to put that person in that situation, in that predicament. So their goal is to master that workflow, quite frankly, so that they know that they have backed their team to the best of their ability. Now, when we look at a supplier, and I want to give you kind of a strange example, but when I look at our base customer base at Corpay, our customers that come on board are extremely important to us. But the suppliers are just as important, quite honestly, because if you think about it, if suppliers aren't willing to be paid electronically and automatically, first of all, we're not in business. That would not be a good situation, but there's no benefit to our customer. So if we don't treat the suppliers as customers, we're failing both our customer and our supplier. So keep that in mind as we're talking through the whole journey of automating payments, is that we're not only supporting the AP staff and the customer, we're supporting the supplier and the business on the back end. So for the CFO, for example, he or she is looking to reduce costs and generate a diversified revenue stream. Again, Doug brought us on to talk about how we generate that revenue. And it's going to get very simple. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to do that in the next few slides. Before I get to those next few slides, though, how about if we jump here first to what the dealership's needs might be, and then we'll go a little further. So dealerships' goals are obviously to maintain relationships. But again, they have different objectives, right? Which is what we just talked about a second ago. So dealerships might be looking, or organizations might be looking to utilize and take advantage of all payment terms out there. They're also looking, again, to save time and to save money with strategic initiatives. Extremely important. Again, what does the supplier want? Well, they want to get paid, and they want to get paid on time, and they don't want to maybe kowtow with their terms and adjust terms, willingly when it doesn't make sense to that supplier. So suppliers in general like to have choices, which is something that we have found at Corpay as well, which is exciting to us. That's why we've done so well in this business world of payments, because we do not pigeonhole our suppliers into a single payment method. We have multiple payment methods that the supplier can be paid for to further maximize how these payments are going out the door. So before we jump any further forward, why don't we look at the next poll question? This is an interesting question because it can be difficult and challenging sometimes. I would love to know in the audience today is who has gone out there to try and calculate what the cost is of different payment types. So if you're running, for example, full checks, do you know what it costs you to do that today? Hard costs, soft costs, that type of thing. So let me know, have you looked into all payment types and what the cost is to your company? Okay, interesting. So again, we're right in the middle of the road, which is exactly as to be expected, quite frankly. Not something that I'm shocked by. It is something, however, that if we can get better at it and learn what it takes to become more efficient, again, we're going to affect that bottom line in a positive way. So let's cover a couple of the things where we can hopefully decrease some of those efficiencies, or inefficiencies, I should say, and then we're going to move forward as to where we're going to save the dollars and cents, and I think this will start making some sense. Think about your workflow today when you look at your AP and the payments that are going out the door. Do you have on-demand checks, for example? Do you have corporate cards that are in your pockets for maybe your sales reps that are traveling? Do you have fuel cards? The point I'm getting at, and let me back up a step. And are you dabbling in ACH? That's going to be another thing that we're going to want to talk about is, are you looking at automating the way that you're currently doing things, or are you already doing that? From what the poll is saying to me, most of us are not there yet, it sounds like. So what we want to do now is get away from where those inefficiencies are hurting you guys as a whole, as an organization, whether it's manual reporting that's going across different platforms. So I have customers all the time that say, Pam, what we want to do is we want to get away from on-demand checks where at all possible, because we lack the visibility to know what's going on. We certainly don't have control. And at the end of the day, we can't reconcile the information efficiently. So when they're working through processes and through platforms like ours with Corpay, their ability now to take those payments and run them through one workflow completely changes and decreases those inefficiencies. So super important. But it's also expensive. For some of you on the call today, when you answered the poll question about whether you've been dabbling in other payment types, where are you on that automated journey of optimizing payments? Well, I can tell you assuredly that it is not inexpensive to run paper checks. When you look at all the labor costs and the operational costs to push a check out the door, not to mention the risk that goes along with that check and the reliability that we are, I guess we're at the mercy of the Postal Service. I don't want to bash our Postal Service because I'm not being a good American, I guess, by saying that. But they have not come out in the paper and said, hey, we're going to do things faster. In fact, they've had to come out and say, things are going to move a little bit slower, and oh, by the way, your postage is actually going to go up. So it's not necessarily the best way to handle things from an operational standpoint. But here's the other thing, is it also now is affecting things from a security standpoint. So also keep that in mind. So let's go to the next slide here. So here's where I'm putting you all to work, and I'm not asking you to do it right now on a webinar. You're here to just listen, and I apologize. I mean, I appreciate Doug letting me be on here today, but I really love being in a room and talking to folks one-on-one or in small or large groups to really get feedback and have more of a conversation. But anyways, the reason I say that is I really want to know how things look with you all today. And so you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper after this call, if you choose to do so, obviously, with you and your staff, to understand how you are functioning today. And I'm using dealership again as an example, so I apologize for you folks that are on the call that maybe aren't in the automotive or truck space, but it's okay. Again, it affects all organizations alike. Do you know what it costs when an invoice comes in the door, for example? Do you know what it takes and how long it takes you to process that invoice into a payment and get it out to that supplier? How many suppliers are you guys dealing with today? If you have late invoices per month, are you able to quantify the effect that that's having on you? I'm bringing up some of these bullet points because they are important, because it's strategic for you all to know what the cost is for you from an AP standpoint, so that we can help you figure out how to get away from that and how to reduce those costs. So I'm going to give you a quick example. We have a customer, Tech Equipment, out in Oregon, that has been a customer of mine, a truck customer of mine forever. And they had been in very high growth mode for a very long period of time. And I was interviewing the CFO of the company at the time, and she was just beaming. And I said, Gina, why are you, smiling? And she said, well, because we're here to do the video, and that's what we were on site to do. She said, but we're actually acquiring a couple more locations. And I'm so thankful that we have you guys, because I don't have to go out and now try and find qualified staff to now move into those locations and run AP functions, because she has now a centralized staff that's able to do that and able to scale at the pace that they needed to as they were acquiring new locations. So again, this is just something to keep in mind as you're growing, which I hope you guys are all growing while you're on this, as far as when you're on this call, that you're in growth mode and not in decreasing mode, I guess I should say. That didn't come out very well. But again, if you're in growth mode, you've got to be able to handle that growth. So these are some of the bullet points that I'd really love for you to take a look at internally to see what your costs are today and where could we make those changes to help decrease those costs. So let's take a look at this screen. And I don't know if this looks familiar to anybody that's listening today and watching the screen move down the list of slides that we're working through. I'm curious if this looks familiar to any of you guys, or maybe all of you are going to say, you know what, this doesn't look like my payment flow at all. Well, what I would argue is that most people in accounts payable are still in this position. Now, it's not because you're doing something wrong, quite frankly. This is the situation that AP has been in for years. This is not something from 10 years ago, not even 15 years ago. I work with dealerships all the time that are literally generationally handed down from grandmother, grandfather to son to grandson, and on and on and on. And there's always been one department that really doesn't seem to change. So I would honestly say, I joke with my sales reps that that's really our biggest competitor, quite honestly, is the fear of change, if that makes sense. But why I bring up this screen today is 9 times out of 10 when I talk to a prospect and when we just dig into how people are functioning in AP, this is what the process looks like. They're getting the invoices in from their suppliers. They're separating the payments out maybe by payment type, maybe by location, maybe by AP staff. And then they're figuring out where that flow goes from there. So if you're looking at the screen, maybe if you're dabbling in ACH and card and check, this is what your process looks like. Here's the problem. It can be a nightmare because when you get to the end of this chart, it all comes back down to reconciliation. And if it's not adding up from an accounting standpoint, something has gone wrong, and now that flow of this chart goes backwards again, and AP staff are the ones that are getting hit with this. So the reason that we have so much success at Corpay is for that exact reason. Why don't we get smarter? What's the point of doing things the same way, the same time, every generation, every 10 years, we're still doing things the same way? We don't treat ourselves that way. I know on Saturday, I don't have to sit in my office, my home office, and cut a bunch of checks to everybody I owe money to. My utility bill's set up in my bill pay. I'm not having to do that, and I'm pretty sure most of you on this call aren't either. Here's the good news. Let's get out of that. Let's work on how we can get this flow to be more automated, and let's offload the risk, which we haven't even talked about risk yet, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. But why not submit a payment, upload it either into your ERP, or with many of our integrations, it's automatic, which again, I'll talk about some of those integrations in a few minutes. And then why not have someone like Corpay, who's reputable, who does this for a living, push your payment out in an automated way in the best way possible. So gone really are the days of paper check. In fact, if we look at our world of automotive, and again, I apologize for sticking there. I guess I'm just staying in my comfort level. But if we look at just automotive as an example, about 33% of the suppliers in our network only want to take a credit card. And you might all be saying, well, that doesn't make sense because they might get charged for that, which we all know there could be a processing fee when it comes to accepting card. And you're right. But here's the situation. If a supplier knows they can get paid more quickly and they already have a process in place, they're willing to take that processing fee, eat the fee, and remove or decrease the amount of time it takes for them to get that payment from whoever owes them that money. But now at the end of this chart, we're looking to reconcile that information more easily. So again, we're looking for a workflow that is straight through, less steps, and a support system behind you all. So we're removing the liability and the risk for you all, and certainly reducing it by a lot. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're also interacting with your vendor base. So this is not on your team to find out how your supplier wants to be paid. We do all of that work for you. And so that's part of the value add, is that we take on all that labor to find out how your suppliers want to accept payment. So super, super important. So deep dive into how it really works. I've kind of already touched on it on the prior screen, so I won't spend a ton of time here, but it really just gets back to being smarter. The bottom line, just be smarter. Your service departments, if you have a service department in automotive, they've gotten smarter. They've got iPads out there in the bays. They're videotaping. If there's a dent that needs to be fixed, they are able to scan information and do everything digitally and optimize that. So everything in most organizations is moving to a more strategic way of doing things by becoming automated. Now, why is AP behind the times? Again, that's where we're going with this conversation. We're trying to get a little smarter. We're trying to think less, get payments out the door, and again, drive revenue back into the organization. So here we go. We've got the last poll question, I believe, of the webinar today. What is the priority for you all? Do you have a priority you've put on an ROI and rebates? If none of you on the call are dabbling in card, you might be saying to yourself, well, what do you mean by rebates? How do we do that? It all comes from being more strategic and paying suppliers how they want to be paid or they're willing to be paid. So is it important? Absolutely. It's important to the bottom line. And as I look at the poll results, there's absolutely some emphasis, and some have put a very high priority on this as I end the poll. So in sharing those results, 71% of you said, yeah, there's definitely a priority, and there is a high priority for several of you as well. So keep that in mind, that it's important to move to a more efficient way of life and to drive that revenue back into the dealership or to your organization. So I'm hoping some of this is starting to resonate with you all as to what Corpay is attempting to do in moving to a really more revenue generating thought process instead of just the monotonous way of getting payments out the door. So we're looking for that single source of truth. We want the visibility with reporting. We want the CFO to know what the AP staff is doing. We want the corporate controller to know that they can scale to be more efficient, as an example. We also want to use rebates to offset costs. So I want to bring up an idea to you all. Although that we specialize on the payment side of the business, there are many customers that we work with that also have a need at the front end of this equation, and that really is invoice automation as well. And the reason I bring that up is we want to automate now possibly the front end, which is the invoice piece, all the way to the payment piece. And the reason I bring that up is you could now take the rebate that you're going to earn with Corpay, which now it's going to get exciting because we're going to really start talking about actual rebate driven into the organization right now, but it actually offsets some of your costs with other initiatives that you might be trying to work on. So it's extremely dynamic, if that makes sense, that you're able to take that revenue stream that was not, realized prior to using someone like Corpay, and now taking that revenue stream and putting it towards things that are more important to the dealership or to your organization. So how do we do that? And how well have we done in doing that? Well, I can tell you in the 11 years that I've been with InvoicePay / Corpay and FleetCor, I've worked with organizations that have a single location up to publicly traded organizations that absolutely love getting a monthly check that's in the thousands of dollars. So how do we do it? There's a lot of ways in which we can drive you to this ROI that you see on my screen. And again, let's talk about it a little bit further. When I look at an organization that has up to 5 locations, I would consider a 1 to 5 shop organization on the smaller side for us. But again, it's still a revenue generator when it comes to Corpay. In fact, I don't have a customer yet that has not received more money in rebate in a month than they would actually get in a bill from us monthly. So the strategic sources of the world, the CDKs of the world, the other DMS providers that we work with love the fact that we are not pulling money out of the dealership's pocket. We're actually putting money into it so that they can, again, use their revenue to drive more strategic initiatives at the corporate level. But this is real money. We look at it about 150 payments a year per dealership is really the average. So if you get into like a 5-store dealer and you're close to 1,900 payments a year, you're going to have a cost. If it's paper check, you obviously have a huge cost. If we said $3 a check and you're pushing out, let's say 2,000 checks a year, there's a huge cost to that, as you guys can probably all do the math on this call. So we're saving not only that check cost of about $12,000, but now we're driving a rebate off of our virtual card program back into the dealership's pocket of just over $16,000. So a full benefit for a smaller dealership annually of about almost $29,000. So this is real money. This is not monopoly money. This is not Bitcoin. This is not points. This is dollar for dollar value back into the organization's bank account every month. And Corpay is doing all the work to strategically set up your suppliers, train your staff to use the Corpay product. We optimize the payment when your dealership or organization pushes the payments to us, and then we're sending you the ACH rebate at the end of the month. So I think it's really something to think about, because we're not attempting to turn your world upside down from an accounting standpoint. Our goal is to work alongside your organization to enhance the AP experience and drive that revenue back into your organization is the prime goal. So here's an interesting slide. Some of this will resonate with you all, and some you might wonder where we're getting this information from. I want to talk a little bit about security when we look at these numbers, and we'll go in a little bit more into security in just a second. There is involvement whenever you have a supplier. And a lot of you have a lot of suppliers. Now, I'm not going to point fingers, and I don't have all of your names to call anybody out today. And I wouldn't do that anyways, because Doug probably would invite me back. But here's a known fact, that if you were to look at your vendor base and your vendor list, I would first of all guesstimate you have a lot of vendors in there that maybe are old and you're not really working with any longer. Now, we're going to focus on the strategic vendors of yours where you actually are having activity. But when you start looking at these numbers over here on the left-hand side, this is the work that Corpay is doing. So please don't let this screen scare you. This is to show you that we're doing a lot of your AP work for your staff that they no longer have to take on themselves. We now become really the handholder for your AP staff to take on a lot of these processes for them to help gain efficiencies and reduce costs. So when I look at this screen and I say, well, 4,094 supplier follow-up and reach out. This is coming from one of our current customers where in a year span of time, this is a very large customer, for a year span of time, we've done the reach out to those suppliers to find out how they'll accept payment. And some of it may have been continuous. We may have asked them if they would accept ACH, and we may have called them a second time to find out if they're willing to move from check to ACH. But there's other things that we've done here as well. And let me give you another example. If you're not using ACH payments today as a method to send out a payment to your supplier, you're not necessarily reducing some of your costs. Now, ACH is expensive, don't get me wrong. The good news is Corpay only charges 43 cents a transaction, so it's not really a cost hit for you all on the call today, but it is a cost from a labor standpoint. We, however, take on the responsibility to not only collect the ACH information from your suppliers, we're also authenticating that information. So don't ever think if your AP staff wants to dabble in ACH, don't ever think it's a good idea. And we've seen this, so I hope there's no laughing out there. We have seen customers work with ACH suppliers by getting an Excel spreadsheet, gathering the supplier's bank information, routing information, account information, everything else, and it is handled on an Excel spreadsheet by your AP staff. Not recommended. You all know, I'm sure that you have all at some point in time either been hit personally or professionally by scams or fraud. It's a real problem. It's not something that is that we're trying to blow up to help our business. That is not at all the case, quite frankly, but we're willing to take on the responsibility. So we're vetting out the information to make sure that your supplier's bank information is actual. We put it through another third party to authenticate the information. But the bottom line, these 90 ACH errors prevented or resolved were by us because the customer here handed over the responsibility for us to take on the payment piece. So these are not hours your team is spending. This is what we're doing on the backside to support you as our customer. So keep that in mind. It's continuous and it's ongoing when it comes to Corpay. And as you can see, it's a full-time job for us, and that's how we stay very busy.
Pam, this is Doug. Can I interject?
Absolutely, Doug.
You were speaking my language here a second ago. Just for the listeners out there, I want you to understand that there are about 130 expense categories in a dealership that a dealer will spend money on. A typical dealer will spend money in 100 of those categories, between 95 and 100. What we typically see in a single point dealer is 400 suppliers, 404 to be exact. So the average supplier to expense category is about 2.5 to 1. We have seen larger groups, 20 plus stores, that have 4,500 suppliers that are supporting those same 100 expense categories. So that's a 45 to 1 ratio. I have seen a large public company that has 30,000 suppliers. So do the math.
Yep.
And what Pam was talking about here not only is efficiency on the payment side, but from my perspective, dealers have far too many suppliers in their system and adding too much complexity. So I just wanted to reinforce what you were saying, Pam, because it makes absolute sense.
Well, and I appreciate it, Doug. You know, you probably know this better than I because I didn't know that there was that many expense categories. So I appreciate the fact that I just learned something, Doug. So these are takeaways for me. But it's interesting that you bring up that information because, first of all, it's a full-time job to handle the vendor base, don't you think? I mean, an AP staff, they look at that and they go, I have 4,000 suppliers, but we really only use, let's say, 400. And I'm just throwing that out as an example. Guess what they say to us? Well, we can't go live using your software because our database is a mess. That's the first thing they say to us. Right. And what our comeback is, Doug, is that we're not asking you all to clean up your database. That's not at all what we're saying. We're going to scrub it, however, from our perspective and really focus on where you've had spend for the last 12 months because that's really what's relevant for all of us here. But you bring up a great point, Doug, that there's a lot to this. Suppliers are becoming actually much more, they're becoming smarter, quite honestly, and they're looking for ways to receive payments in a smarter way as well. And again, I brought up that example earlier where people push back and say, well, we're not going to move with this because nobody's going to accept card. That's truly not the case. And as I bring up this next slide, this kind of falls right into what I'm talking about, is that our pie chart in automotive has been very, very stable over the last 8 to 10 years. It's actually had a huge hit in a good way since COVID started. So I don't want to promote ourselves that we benefited from COVID because that sounds terrible because we've all lived through a lot. But the only reason I bring that up is think of the CFO that had to sign checks at a dealership in Florida a year and a half ago. And he comes down with COVID. He wasn't at his place of business to sign those checks. Well, same thing was happening to suppliers. Suppliers were getting that same check in the mail, and they weren't at their place of business to pick up the check, to cash the check. So that's really where we've evolved over the last several years, is suppliers and our customers and prospects are getting smarter to realize, why are we still pushing out a check that's costing us anywhere between $3 upwards of $20 just to make a payment to a supplier? So now when we look at our whole vendor base as a Corpay entity, we're about 33% card. We're dabbling between 40 and 43% on ACH, just as a kind of giving you a heads up. So we're about 70 to 80%, and I know that's a little bit of a generalization, of being completely automated, meaning ACH and card combined is making up that 70 to 80% mix. But here's the beauty of that scenario. Our customers are actually 100% electronic. We're not leaving payments on the table. So if a supplier like, I don't know, Al's Tow Service, a really small tow service in the middle of Iowa, just wants to get the paper check because that's just what they're comfortable with, that's fine. What happens is our customer then is pushing the payment file to us. We're optimizing the payment based on what your supplier tells us. And if it's a paper check, we push the paper check out first class mail, and then we surface up the image of the check right in your software. So we can actually proudly say we're 100% electronic when it comes to AP automation, because we're taking care of all payment types. We are not just a card solution. So what does it mean to you all? It means actual money back in the pocket. For this customer here, it was over $379,000 that they're collecting back in rebates per year, again, based on the size of the organization. So something really for you all to take a look at, and hope that you're a little more curious as to what this means to you all from an organization standpoint. One final thought, there's just a couple more items. I know we're getting towards the end of the hour. There's just a couple more items, though, that I wanted to go through quickly because we are running out of time, is that we're agnostic when it comes to who we work with. And we're really proud of that because we want to be flexible, and we bred ourselves as a fintech company. So the CDK Globals that I mentioned early on in this conversation, that was really our starting point and our traction in automotive back in 2009. But we've evolved from there, not only in automotive, but all over the place. So folks at DealerTrack and Proceed, one of our great partners, Proceed we've been working with for a while, PBS, a few new ones, Techion and Carmack have come on board recently. We're working with those folks as well. But again, don't think of us just as automotive. MGM Hotels and Lyft also fall into our category as some of our customers as well. So don't be afraid to reach out to Doug and his team over at Strategic Source to understand a little bit better as to what we have to offer you all as not only an AP staff, not only as an organization, not only as a supplier. How do we holistically bring everything together, peel back the onion, and work symbiotically as a company to have everybody working hand in hand, if that makes sense. So with that, I am nearing the end, Doug, because I know I'm running out of time and I think I'm just talking too much here. But I think if there's, we may have some Q&A questions I think we're going to go to, and then we'll wrap it up.
Let me instruct on how to do the Q&A. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, everyone. You can click on that and type in a question here for Pam, and we'll get as many covered as we can during the remaining time. Here we go. Here's one. Our dealership does business with many small suppliers that still prefer paper check. Is Corpay able to help us facilitate this payment style until they decide to possibly accept digital transactions?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kind of touched on it slightly, David, but that's a great question. We can. Is it the smartest way for us to send it? No, because honestly, it's still a little bit of a pain for us, because now we're trying to work to follow up to make sure that that supplier cashes the check. Ultimately, though, it's still going to be a small piece of all of our worlds. So if the supplier chooses to be paid that way, we push that check out first class mail. However, it does go out with a form and it says, our customer is looking to pay you electronically. If you fill out this form, we can certainly move you off of check. So they can stay on check for as long as they want, but they always have the option to move forward with check or I'm sorry, with ACH or card.
All right, here's another. You discussed pricing out payment fees. I don't have much time to try calculating the fees and costs of making payments on my own. Can Corpay help us understand where we might reduce cost and possibly ROI?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Really, that's probably a takeaway, quite frankly, is it's an action item for everybody on this call that if you are interested in understanding what your AP costs are today, first of all, I'm happy to help. Most importantly, what we do for prospects is we get a vendor list of all of your activity for the last 12 months, and we let you know which fields we need. And we actually run an analysis and we butt it up to our network. So our goal is to give you true information. Our goal is not to boost information and have it not be truthful, quite frankly, because it comes back to bite you in the, I shouldn't say rear, but that's where it bites you, is we want to look at your entire 12 months of spend. We're going to match it up to our vendor base, find out who accepts card, who accepts ACH, and then we're going to turn around that ROI for you all to show you what your savings is and what your rebate is that we're going to drive back into your bank account at the end of every month.
Again, feel free to click on the Q&A button and enter a question here for Pam. Doug, how much more time did you want to put towards Q&A before we wrap?
Let's go another couple of minutes, Dave. That's fine.
Okay, here's another. How specifically can Corpay help us activate vendors of ours that may be unable to or have trouble accepting payments?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Here's the beauty of that. We don't want the customer to have to do that work. If they're coming on board to use us, they're not looking for more things to do, Doug and David, they're looking for less to do. So anybody in their vendor base is literally capable of accepting payment from us. So if you add a new supplier into your network today and you're a customer of ours, you simply send the file, or if it's integrated, we're going to get the information automatically. And if the vendor is not set up in our system to accept card or ACH, we push out the payment automatically via check, and then we ask them to accept card and ACH payments after the fact. So we can activate vendors on the run and basically in real time. So pretty exciting stuff.
What I'm going to do as we get ready to answer another question or two is I'm going to bring up the post-session survey that people can give their feedback. If they have to depart, they can give us their feedback quickly on this before we finish out the session. All right, here's another. Pam, you say that approximately 80% of businesses experience fraud. Are there any specific types of fraud you tend to see the most that businesses should be mindful of?
Yeah, another good question. You know, ACH is on the rise for fraud because people are opening up possibly bank accounts that are not legitimate, things like that. So it's something absolutely to be leery of. Again, when you're working with us, we take on that liability and the risk. So that's something to keep in mind, that we're offloading that for our customer and we're authenticating the information, so you again are not liable for that information coming from the supplier. It comes directly from the supplier to Corpay with no middleman in between. So keep that in mind. That's one of the first fraud issues. The secondary issue is whitewashing of checks, which has been around for a very long time. It is on the rise as well because I think people are becoming, I don't want to say more desperate, but that is kind of a case in point, that there is desperation out there at times. So we're in charge of every check that goes through our system. So once you push the file to us, we're pushing the check out really on our account, quite frankly, pulled funds from your account as our customer, push it out off of our account. So we become responsible for any whitewashing or any fraudulent check issues that might come through.
Doug, we're nearing the top of the hour. We want to talk one more, or should we wrap?
Yeah, I think we better close her out here.
Okay.
So, Pam, you did an outstanding job here today. I'm a big believer in what you do, and we're certainly an advocate. Dave, can you advance that slide, please?
Sure.
We're certainly an advocate for reducing that supplier base and helping to optimize that overall opportunity. So Pam and team on the Corpay side, thank you very much. You did an outstanding job. We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in a copy of this presentation today, you can reach us via email at sales@strategicsource.com, or you can text us at 612-386-3898. We'll be happy to get a copy of the presentation out to you. There will be a copy probably by tomorrow on the Strategic Source website. And of course, you can certainly reach out to Pam and her team, and she can get that information to you as well. We have a continuing series of innovative supplier webinars going on through, I think we're booked throughout the year, different topics, different suppliers, all vetted, all checked out and validated by our sourcing team. So I'd encourage you to join us again for the next Innovative Supplier webinar. Again, thank you, Pam, and thank you, David, for an expert job of moderating.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Pam, and thank you, Doug, and thanks everyone for attending. We appreciate everyone doing that post-session survey. That's great input for us. So have a wonderful rest of the week, and we look forward to you joining us on future webinars with Strategic Source. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.